there is a real possibility that the universe you are in right now does not exist continuously. It may be disappearing and reappearing billions of times every second. And you have never noticed, because neither did your mind. Right now, as you are listening to this voice, there may be moments where nothing exists at all. No space, no time, no darkness, not even silence. And yet, everything feels perfectly stable. The room around you does not flicker. Your body does not vanish. Your thoughts feel uninterrupted. Reality feels solid, reliable, present. But what if that feeling is not proof of continuity? What if it is only proof of how good the illusion is? We are deeply conditioned to believe that existence is always on. That reality runs like a steady river, flowing smoothly from one moment to the next. That time moves forward without gaps. That the universe is always there, holding us moment after moment. But almost everything else we trust works very differently. A movie feels continuous, yet it is only a rapid sequence of still frames. A screen feels alive, yet it is flickering on and off faster than the eye can detect. Electricity feels constant, yet it oscillates, reverses, pulses. Continuity, again and again, turns out to be a trick of speed. And tonight, we begin with a quiet but unsettling question. What if existence itself works the same way? What if the universe is not a flowing river, but a rapid heartbeat? On, off, so fast that nothing inside it ever realizes it stopped. If that were true, then consciousness would not be witnessing a continuous world. It would be stitching together fragments, holding onto afterimages, smoothing over the gaps where nothing exists. Your awareness would not be observing reality. It would be buffering it. And if that idea feels uncomfortable, that is not a flaw. That discomfort is the point where certainty begins to loosen, because science has already whispered something similar, quietly, indirectly, through the places where it fails to measure. There is a smallest meaningful unit of time. Below it, our equations fall apart, not because reality ends, but because continuity itself may not apply. Between one tick and the next, there is no confirmed guarantee that something must exist. We assume it does, because assuming otherwise feels terrifying. Yet think carefully. If the universe were to vanish for a trillionth of a second, who would be there to notice? Not light, not matter, not memory, and certainly not you, because memory itself would vanish with it. From the inside, existence would feel uninterrupted, perfectly smooth, eternally present. A universe that flickers fast enough leaves no witnesses to its absence. And now consider this. If reality only exists in bursts, then every moment you experience is not guaranteed. It is not sustained. It is regranted, again and again and again. This does not make existence fragile. It makes it astonishingly precise, like a cosmic metronome that has never missed a beat, not once, in nearly 14 billion years. But what sets that rhythm? What determines the tempo of reality itself? And more importantly, what happens in the gaps? Those gaps, if they exist, would not be emptiness. They would be something far stranger. They would be non-existence without darkness, silence without sound, a pause where even the concept of pause has no meaning, a place where nothing waits, and yet something always returns. This is where the idea becomes truly unsettling, because if the universe can turn off and back on, then continuity is not a law. It is a habit so consistent that it feels like necessity. You are listening to Whispers of the Universe. And if this exploration resonates with you, if you want to continue drifting deeper into questions most people never dare to ask, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who wonders quietly at night, and subscribe to the channel. Your support allows these long journeys through silence, time, and existence itself to continue. Now, imagine the exact instant when the universe turns off, not fades, not collapses, not explodes. It simply stops. There is no blackness, because blackness requires space. There is no silence, because silence requires time. There is no observer, because observers require continuity. There is nothing to experience the absence. And then, without transition, the universe turns back on. Every particle exactly where it was, every law intact, every memory restored. From the inside, nothing happened. From the outside, there is no outside. If this sounds impossible, remember how many things once did. Time dilation, quantum superposition, the bending of space. Reality has never promised to feel intuitive. It only promised to work. And perhaps this is how it works. Not as an unbroken stream, but as an unimaginably fast sequence of existences. Each one complete. Each one unaware of the void before it. Which raises a question that will follow us for the rest of this journey. If existence is granted moment by moment, what is it that keeps saying yes? And what would happen if it ever said no? Hold that question gently. Because the next thing we must explore is how time itself behaves when existence is no longer continuous. And whether the present moment, the one you feel right now, is thinner than you have ever imagined. Time feels smooth to you, not fast, not slow, just flowing. Seconds seem to glide into minutes. Minutes dissolve into hours. There are no visible seams, no edges, no gaps. But that smoothness may not belong to time itself. It may belong to the way your mind is built. Because when physicists began to look closely at time, not as a feeling, but as a measurable phenomenon, something strange appeared. Time refused to divide forever. No matter how precise the instruments became, no matter how clever the equations grew, there was a boundary. A smallest, meaningful slice. A point beyond which time could no longer be described as passing. This boundary is known as Planck time. It is unimaginably small. So small that a single second contains more Planck intervals than there are seconds in the entire age of the universe. And yet, below that scale, physics does not say what happens. Not because it is secret, not because it is forbidden, but because the concept of time itself stops making sense. Below that threshold, our equations fall silent. And silence, in science, is never comfortable. We tend to assume that silence means ignorance. That if we had better tools or more powerful theories, continuity would reappear. But sometimes, silence means something else. Sometimes it means the question itself is wrong. We ask, what happens between these moments? But what if there is no between? What if time does not flow through those intervals, but jumps? Imagine a clock that does not sweep. It does not tick either. It simply updates. State, state, state. No motion between them. From the inside, the updates feel continuous. From the outside, there is no outside to observe the gap. This is where the discomfort begins to deepen. Because if time updates rather than flows, then the present moment is not a point on a river. It is a frame. And if the universe is built from frames, then existence itself may be more like a refresh rate than a duration. Your screen does not glow continuously. It refreshes dozens, hundreds, sometimes thousands of times per second. Between refreshes, the image does not slowly fade. It simply is not there. Yet you never see the absence. Your vision stitches the frames together. Your perception smooths over the gaps, and your confidence in what you see becomes absolute. The universe may be doing something similar. Not at 60 frames per second, not at a million, but at a tempo so extreme that even reality itself forgets the gaps exist. If that is true, then the smallest unit of time is not a slice of duration. It is a permission, a moment where existence is allowed to occur, and then just as quietly allowed again. What keeps granting that permission? Physics does not answer this. It only tells us where its answers stop. And it stops exactly where continuity would need to be proven. This is not a coincidence. Because continuity is something we assume, not something we observe. We never measure time flowing. We only measure change. A clock does not detect time. It counts transitions. A heartbeat does not reveal duration. It marks intervals. Even atomic clocks, the most precise timekeepers we have ever built, do not observe time itself. They observe oscillations, repetitions, rhythms. Time is inferred, always inferred, which means the feeling that time flows smoothly is not evidence of its nature. It is evidence of how our minds assemble experience. Your consciousness cannot register the absence of time. If time were to pause completely for a trillionth of a second, you would not feel it. You would not remember it. You would not even suspect it happened. From your perspective, the next moment would simply arrive, fully formed, uninterrupted, which leads to a deeply unsettling realization. If time were discontinuous, you would have no way to know. No memory could cross the gap. No observation could span the absence. Every experience you have ever had could have been separated by countless moments where nothing existed at all. And yet, to you, life would feel perfectly continuous. This does not make time unreliable. It makes perception incomplete. We trust continuity because it feels necessary, because the alternative feels too strange. But the universe has never promised to feel familiar. In fact, every time we look closer, it becomes less so. Particles are not points. They are probabilities. Events do not happen at locations. They happen across distributions. Causality itself becomes blurred at the smallest scales. And time, the thing we rely on to order everything, becomes fuzzy, granular, and strangely quiet. So quiet that it may not even exist between its own moments. Now consider this carefully. If the universe only exists during these permitted instants, these refreshes, then what you call now is not extended. It has no thickness. It is not a slice you are inside of. It is a boundary you are always crossing, again and again and again. Your awareness is not sitting in the present. It is leaping between presents so quickly that the leap itself disappears. And if that is true, then your experience of continuity is not a feature of time. It is a feature of memory. Memory does not record absence. It only records what happened when something was there to be recorded. So memory creates a story, a seamless narrative, a flowing line, and that line feels like time. But a story can skip pages without the reader noticing, as long as the plot still makes sense. Now, ask yourself something quietly. If time itself can skip, what else might be skipping with it? Space? Causality? Existence itself? We tend to imagine the universe as something that persists and changes within time. But what if time is the thing that flickers, and the universe is rebuilt each time it returns? Not recreated, not restarted, simply resumed, state by state, perfectly consistent, perfectly unaware of the gaps. This idea may feel radical, but it has a strange advantage. It explains why the universe is so stable, why laws do not drift, why constants do not wander, because they are not evolving continuously. They are being reasserted, again and again, like a rulebook, consulted at every moment of existence. If the universe were truly continuous, tiny errors might accumulate, fluctuations might drift. But if it is rebuilt each instant from a consistent rule set, stability is natural. Continuity is not required, only consistency is. And now the question deepens. If time itself may not exist between moments, then where does change occur? Change cannot happen in nothingness. It can only happen where existence is present, which means all motion, all causality, all becoming may be confined to these discrete instants. Between them, there is no waiting, no background, no silent passage, just absence. And absence does not flow. This reframes the universe in a subtle but profound way. Reality is not something that endures. It is something that keeps happening, and your presence within it is not guaranteed by continuity. It is renewed, moment by moment, which brings us closer to a realization that may feel both unsettling and strangely calming. If existence is granted in discrete instants, then nothing is ever truly lost in the gaps. Because there is no place for loss to occur, nothing fades, nothing drifts away. Things simply are, or they are not, and when they are fully there. The present moment you are in right now is not sliding into the next one. It is being replaced, so gently, so precisely, that you mistake replacement for flow. And this raises a question that cannot yet be answered. If time does not flow continuously, then what decides when the next moment is allowed to exist? What sets the rhythm of reality? And what would it mean if that rhythm were ever to change? Let that question remain open, because to approach it we must first examine something even more intimate than time itself. We must look at the thing that experiences these moments and somehow never notices when they disappear. Your mind has never experienced a gap, at least not one it could remember. Every thought you have ever had feels connected to the one before it. Every sensation blends smoothly into the next. Even silence feels continuous. But this smoothness is not proof, it is a construction. Because the human brain is not a recorder of reality, it is an editor. It does not capture everything that happens. It selects, compresses, and most importantly, it fills in what is missing. This is not a flaw. It is how survival works. When you blink, the world disappears. Light stops hitting your retina. Information ceases. Yet, you do not experience darkness. Your brain erases the absence. When your eyes jump rapidly from one point to another, visual input is briefly suppressed. Reality goes quiet for an instant. And still, you perceive a stable scene. Your mind edits out the cut. Now, consider what that means. If your perception already hides gaps that last milliseconds, what would it do with gaps that last a billionth of a second? It would not struggle. It would not fail. It would never notice. The brain was never designed to detect non-existence, only change. If nothing happens, there is nothing to register. And if nothing exists, there is no place for experience to attach itself. So awareness simply resumes, as if nothing had stopped. This is why the idea of a flickering universe feels so alien. Not because it contradicts experience, but because experience is blind to it. Continuity is not something we sense. It is something we assume. We feel time flowing because memory overlaps moments. Each new instant arrives, carrying traces of the last. This overlap creates the illusion of motion, of persistence, of a world that never lets go. But memory is not a bridge across non-existence. It is rebuilt every time existence returns, which means something unsettling. If the universe were to disappear completely between moments, your mind would still wake up whole. Your memories would still be there. Your identity would still feel intact. From the inside, nothing would seem to have been lost, because nothing could carry loss across nothingness. Identity, then, may not be continuous either. It may be reinstantiated, again and again. You are not the same awareness persisting through time. You are a succession of nearly identical awakenings, so close together that you mistake repetition for endurance. This does not mean you are fragile. It means you are precise. Now imagine slowing this process down, not stopping it, just stretching the gaps. If the universe flickered once per second instead of billions of times per second, you would notice. Reality would stutter. Objects would freeze and jump. Thoughts would fracture. Continuity would shatter. So, the fact that you experience continuity does not prove it exists. It only proves the rhythm is fast enough to outrun awareness, fast enough to turn absence into invisibility. This leads us to a subtle but powerful realization. The universe does not need to be continuous to feel real. It only needs to be consistent. Consistency fools intuition. If every moment obeys the same rules, if every reappearance aligns perfectly with the last, then nothing betrays the interruption. Reality does not tear. It resets, and resets are quiet. Now think about causality. We believe one event causes another through time. A push leads to motion. A spark leads to flame. But causality, like time, is inferred. We never see causes travel. We only see patterns of correlation. One thing happens, then another. If the universe were reconstructed moment by moment, causality would not be a force moving through time. It would be a rule applied at every refresh. Not this caused that, but given this state, the next state must follow. Causality becomes a condition, not a process. This is a profound shift, because it means nothing is actually moving forward. Nothing is carrying influence across gaps. Everything is being recalculated. And yet, from inside the system, it feels exactly the same. This is why the universe appears so dependable. Why the laws of physics do not drift or decay. They are not being dragged through time. They are being reapplied, moment after moment. Now, pause here for a breath. If this is true, then the universe does not remember itself. It does not need to. Memory exists only within moments of existence. Between them, there is no storage, no archive, no waiting room. The past does not sit behind you. It only exists as information encoded in the present. Your memories are not records pulled forward through time. They are patterns recreated now, which means the past is not something you carry. It is something that keeps being rebuilt. This idea unsettles our deepest assumptions. We like to think the past is fixed, stored somewhere beyond reach. But in a flickering universe, the past survives only if it is reasserted. Again and again, nothing endures by default. Endurance must be maintained. And now consider the future. If the universe is rebuilt each moment, then the future is not waiting to arrive. It is not already there. It does not exist yet, not even faintly. The future only becomes real when the next moment is granted, which means existence is always balanced on a knife edge between nothing and something. And it keeps choosing something. Why? Why does the universe keep turning back on? Why has the rhythm never slipped? Never paused too long? Never faltered? This question does not lead to answers yet. It leads to wonder. Because wonder is the correct response to a system that works flawlessly without ever revealing its mechanism. You are not listening to a story about failure. You are listening to a story about perfection so complete that it hides itself. A universe that flickers, but never flickers wrong. And that perfection extends to you. Your thoughts are not drifting through time. They are appearing. Your sensations are not persisting. They are being refreshed. Your sense of self is not a thread. It is a pattern that keeps returning. This makes the present moment extraordinary. Not because it is long, but because it exists at all. The moment you are in right now is not guaranteed to extend into the next. It simply has. And it will again, until one moment it does not. But even that idea, the idea of an ending, may be misleading. Because an ending would require a final moment, and in a universe that flickers, there may be no finality. Only a last granted instant, followed by nothing to witness its absence. So the question shifts. Not, how long does existence last? But, why does it keep restarting? And to approach that, we must examine something even more fundamental than time or memory. We must look at the rules themselves. The invisible instructions that tell the universe how to reappear. Exactly the same, every single time. If the universe is rebuilt each moment, then something extraordinary must be true. Every time existence returns, it returns with instructions. Not vague tendencies, not approximate behaviors, but precise rules. The kind of rules that place every particle exactly where it needs to be. That restore every force at the correct strength. That allow atoms to bind, stars to burn, and thoughts to form without hesitation. Nothing comes back confused. There is no hesitation when reality resumes. No recalibration. No gradual warming up. It simply is. Which suggests that whatever governs existence does not evolve slowly. It does not experiment. It does not learn. It applies. Again and again, physics calls these rules laws. But laws is a misleading word. Laws imply enforcement, authority, a system that persists through time. But in a flickering universe, there may be no time for laws to persist through. They may not be carried forward at all. They may be reasserted. Every moment. That distinction matters. Because if the laws of physics had to survive through gaps of non-existence, they would need a place to exist when the universe does not. And there is no evidence of such a place. No container. No background reality. No silent archive holding the rulebook while everything else disappears. So where do the rules come from? They may not come from anywhere. They may simply be the condition under which existence is allowed to occur. Not laws that govern a universe, but constraints that define what a universe can be. If that sounds abstract, consider this. A chessboard does not remember its rules between games. The rules are not stored in the pieces. They are applied whenever a game begins. Each new game starts clean, yet the behavior is identical, not because the board remembers, but because the rules are reinstated. The universe may be doing something similar, not playing one long game, but restarting the same game over and over, so quickly that it feels continuous, which reframes everything we think we know about stability. The universe is not stable because it persists. It is stable because it is constrained. It cannot come back differently, because if it did, it would not come back at all. Only configurations that satisfy the conditions of existence are permitted. Everything else simply never appears. This leads to a subtle inversion. We tend to think the laws of physics exist because the universe exists. But it may be the opposite. The universe exists because the laws allow it. Every moment of existence is not guaranteed by the past. It is allowed by the rules. Again and again. Now pause and feel how strange that is. If existence depends on permission rather than momentum, then nothing is truly being carried forward. Not matter, not energy, not even time. Everything is being reissued. The universe does not coast. It is continually authorized, and authorization is not automatic. It implies criteria. This is where the question becomes unsettling. What happens if the criteria are not met? What if, at some scale we do not understand, a configuration fails to satisfy the conditions required to exist? Would reality hesitate? Would it fracture? Would it collapse? Or would it simply not reappear? We do not see such failures, which suggests one of two things. Either the universe is unimaginably robust or unimaginably constrained. There may be no room for error. The rules may not tolerate deviation. This could explain something that has long puzzled physics. Why are the constants of nature so finely tuned? Why do tiny changes in fundamental values lead to universes that collapse instantly or never form structure at all? In a flickering universe, this is not surprising. Only the configurations that can survive reassertion are ever observed. Everything else vanishes before it can be noticed. Reality does not select for life. It selects for self-consistency. Life is simply something that happens inside that narrow corridor, which means you are not living in a universe that gradually stabilized. You are living in a universe that cannot be otherwise. Every moment you experience is not balanced on chance. It is balanced on necessity, but necessity of a very strange kind. Not the necessity of cause and effect, but the necessity of constraint. The universe does not continue because it must. It continues because it fits, and that fitting happens every moment. Now consider the implications for change. If the rules are reapplied perfectly each time, how does anything ever evolve? How do stars age? How do galaxies form? How do you grow older? The answer is subtle. Change does not accumulate across gaps. It is encoded within each state. The next moment does not inherit the past. It satisfies the rules given the current configuration. State leads to state not by memory, but by rule, which means the universe does not need to remember where it was. It only needs to be consistent with what is. This makes evolution possible without continuity, like a calculation that is recalculated every time from its current values. No history required, just structure. Now notice what this does to the idea of persistence. Nothing persists because it lasts. Things persist because they are reconstructed correctly. Your body does not endure because its atoms remain. Atoms are replaced constantly. Your body persists because its pattern is maintained, and that pattern does not need continuity. It needs fidelity. This reframes identity in a profound way. You are not something that moves through time. You are something that keeps being reassembled, accurately, faithfully, moment after moment, which raises a question that quietly unsettles the self. If you are reassembled each instant, what guarantees that the next version is still you? Not similar to you, not close to you, but you. The answer we usually give is memory. But memory, as we have seen, does not cross non-existence. It must be recreated too. So identity is not preserved by transport. It is preserved by structure, and structure can exist without continuity. This is comforting and disturbing at the same time. Comforting because nothing fragile needs to survive the gaps. Disturbing because nothing is truly anchored. Everything exists because it is allowed to exist now, which means the present moment is far more fundamental than the past. The present is not the result of what came before. It is the only place where existence is confirmed. Everything else is inference. This also means the universe has no obligation to continue. There is no momentum forcing the next moment to appear. only consistency, only permission. And yet, it keeps happening, perfectly, relentlessly. Which brings us to a question that physics avoids, not because it is meaningless, but because it is too deep. Why does the rulebook exist at all? Why are there constraints rather than chaos? Why is there a structure that can be reapplied infinitely many times? There is no empirical answer. But the absence of an answer does not mean the question is empty. It means we have reached the edge where explanation gives way to observation. And the observation is this: reality behaves like a system that is constantly restarting, yet never resets. It behaves like a computation that has no memory, yet never forgets. It behaves like a song that has no sustained notes, yet never loses its melody, which suggests that the melody does not exist in time. It exists in relation, in patterns, in rules. And those rules do not need a universe to exist in order to define one. They are not inside reality. They are what reality must satisfy to appear. This is not a comforting thought. It removes the idea of a background stage, a container holding everything steady. Instead, existence feels more like a question being answered. Again and again, each moment answers yes. But the question itself remains hidden. And to approach it, we must move even closer to the most intimate experience you have, the sense that you are here, now, because whatever grants the universe permission to exist, it also grants that feeling. And if that feeling can arise without continuity, then consciousness itself may be flickering too. And that is where we go next. There is a quiet place where physics hesitates, not because it has reached the end of reality, but because reality stops behaving in ways that measurement understands. At the smallest scales we can probe, the universe does not feel solid. It trembles. Particles do not sit still. They fluctuate, appear, disappear. Energy itself refuses to remain constant in tiny intervals. It borrows existence, then returns it. This is not metaphor. This is observation. Even in what we call empty space, nothing is truly empty. There is constant activity, a restless, granular agitation. And the deeper we look, the less the idea of a continuous background makes sense. Space stops behaving like a smooth container. Time stops behaving like a steady line. They become jittery, which is strange. Because if the universe were truly continuous, its smallest scales should be the calmest, not the most chaotic. Yet the opposite is true. The closer we look, the more reality behaves like something being refreshed, not something enduring. Quantum fluctuations are often explained away as noise, as side effects of measurement, as artifacts of uncertainty. But there is another way to see them. What if these fluctuations are not disturbances within existence, but symptoms of existence itself turning on and off? What if the universe, at its most fundamental level, is not vibrating within time, but blinking through it? Consider this carefully. If existence is granted in discrete instants, then at very small scales, we would expect instability, because between one granted moment and the next, nothing connects them. Each moment must reassert itself. Each moment must reappear. And any system that reappears must tolerate a small margin of indeterminacy. Not because it is sloppy, but because it is discrete. This could explain why certainty collapses at the smallest scales, why outcomes become probabilistic, why particles exist as clouds rather than points. Not because reality is undecided, but because it is being reinstantiated. Probability is not ignorance. It is flexibility. The universe does not commit to exact microstates because exactness may not survive flickering. So instead, it commits to distributions, ranges that remain stable across reappearances, which means uncertainty may not be a flaw in knowledge, but a feature of existence. And suddenly, the strange behavior of the quantum world feels less alien. Particles popping in and out of existence, energy appearing briefly from nothing, states that exist only as possibilities until observed. All of this looks less like chaos, and more like a system negotiating its own restart. Observation, then, is not causing collapse. It is synchronizing. When you observe a system, you anchor it to a macroscopic structure that spans many reappearances. Your measuring device is not continuous either. but it flickers at a rhythm slow enough to register patterns. So what you call measurement may simply be alignment. Two flickering systems locking into the same phase. This reframes the observer effect entirely. Reality does not change because it is watched. It stabilizes. Now consider the scale at which this instability disappears. At human scales, everything feels solid, reliable, persistent. Tables do not flicker. Mountains do not vanish. Why? Because large systems average out the flicker. A chair is not a single object. It is trillions of particles, trillions of microstates. Even if some of them fail to align perfectly across instants, the structure survives. Continuity emerges from redundancy. The universe does not need to be continuous everywhere. It only needs to be continuous enough, which explains why reality feels stable to creatures our size. We are built out of averages. Your body exists not because every particle is perfectly reconstructed, but because enough of them are, and the errors cancel out. This is a crucial point. Stability is not proof of continuity. It is proof of scale. The universe does not promise perfection at the smallest level. It promises coherence at larger ones. And that coherence is enough to support life, memory, and thought. Which means you are not standing on solid ground. You are standing on statistical reliability. Now pause here. If existence is statistical, then it does not exist absolutely. It exists sufficiently. Enough for structure. Enough for experience. Enough for now. This brings us back to the idea of flickering. If the universe were blinking in and out of existence, then, at very small scales, that blinking would leave fingerprints. Not visible gaps, but uncertainty. Not absence, but fluctuation. And that is exactly what we see. Which suggests that quantum behavior may not be the bottom of reality, but the edge where continuity breaks down. Below that edge, existence may not behave like a thing at all. It may behave like permission, either granted or not. Now consider this. If existence is granted probabilistically, then the universe is not guaranteed to return exactly the same each moment. And yet, it does, macroscopically. Why? Because only those configurations that reliably reappear survive. Unstable configurations blink out permanently. They never build structure, never accumulate complexity, never leave traces. What we observe is not all that could exist. It is only what can survive flickering. This is a quiet but profound selection process. Not natural selection across time, but existential selection across instants. Only patterns that tolerate disappearance are allowed to persist. Which means life itself may be a pattern optimized not for continuity, but for restart. Your cells die and are replaced. Your molecules turn over. Your memories rewrite themselves. You are not continuous. You are resilient. And resilience is what a flickering universe rewards. This idea dissolves a common fear. If existence is discontinuous, does that make everything fragile? No, it makes everything adaptive. Nothing needs to survive the void. It only needs to reappear correctly. Now, look inward. Your thoughts do not flow smoothly either. They jump, they pause, they resume. Sometimes, there is a moment where you are not thinking anything at all. Not asleep, not distracted, just blank. And then thought returns, fully formed. Those blanks feel harmless, unremarkable, because awareness does not experience its own absence, which should now feel familiar. If the universe were to disappear for a fraction of a second, your awareness would resume exactly the same way. No memory of interruption, no sense of loss, just continuity reconstructed. This brings us to a subtle realization. The feeling of being alive is not proof that existence is uninterrupted. It is proof that interruption leaves no trace. And that is why this hypothesis is so difficult to dismiss. Not because it is proven, but because it is unfalsifiable from the inside. There is no experiment you can run to detect a moment when nothing exists, because detection requires existence. This does not make the idea meaningless. It makes it foundational. Some ideas cannot be tested because they sit beneath the act of testing itself. They define the stage on which testing occurs. And flickering existence may be one of those ideas. Not a theory to be proven, but a lens through which everything else becomes coherent. Quantum uncertainty, the stability of laws, the illusion of continuity, all align. But one question remains uncomfortably open. If existence is probabilistic at small scales and constrained at large ones, what holds the whole system together? What ensures that the universe keeps reappearing rather than drifting into non-existence? Why does probability not eventually fail? Why has there never been a moment where the rules could not be satisfied? This question pushes us beyond physics, not into mysticism, but into something more subtle, the nature of necessity. Because if existence is not guaranteed by time, then something else must be doing the guaranteeing, and that something cannot exist inside the universe. It must be more abstract, more structural, which brings us to the next layer. Not laws, not particles, not time, but the framework that decides whether a universe is allowed to appear at all. And to approach that, we must step back and ask what it means for something to exist, rather than not. That is where we go next. Imagine the precise instant when existence fails to qualify, not collapses, not explodes, not fades into darkness. It simply does not appear. There is no warning, no transition, no sensation of falling away, because sensation itself requires something to exist. In that instant, there is no space for absence to be felt, no time for silence to unfold, no observer left behind to notice what is missing. Non-existence does not announce itself. It leaves no echo, and that is the most unsettling part. We often imagine nothingness as a dark void, a silent background waiting patiently behind reality. But that picture is still something. It still assumes a place where nothing happens. True non-existence has no place, no backdrop, no duration, no depth. It is not an empty room. It is the absence of rooms, which means that if the universe ever fails to appear, there is no experience of failure. There is simply no experience. And then if existence returns, it returns without memory of the gap. From the inside, it feels uninterrupted. This makes non-existence invisible, not hidden, not distant, invisible by definition, because nothing survives it to report what happened. Now consider how radical that is. If the universe were to disappear for an eternity, and then reappear exactly once more, from the inside, that eternity would have no length at all. No time would have passed. The universe would not feel older. Nothing would feel delayed. The next moment would feel immediate, which means that duration itself may only exist while existence is present. Time does not continue in the absence of being. It does not tick in the background. It simply is not. This reframes the question of beginnings and endings. If time cannot pass when nothing exists, then there is no before the universe in any meaningful sense. There is no waiting period, no preparation, no long silence. The universe does not emerge from nothingness. It simply appears, fully formed. And if it were to disappear permanently, there would be no after, no long darkness, no infinite void, just nothing. Which means that from the universe's own perspective, if such a perspective were possible, existence is timeless. It does not begin. It does not end. It either is, or it is not. And when it is not, there is no record of that state. This has an unexpected consequence. It means the universe does not age, not in the way we usually think. We say the universe is nearly 14 billion years old, but that age is measured entirely within moments where the universe exists. If there were gaps, moments of non-existence between instants, they would add nothing to that age. They would contribute no time, which means the universe could have failed to exist countless times without ever growing older. Its age would remain exactly the same. This makes the universe feel less like a fragile structure stretched across time, and more like a pattern that keeps appearing, a pattern that does not accumulate fatigue, a pattern that does not decay between appearances, only within them. Now notice how this subtly shifts the meaning of survival. The universe does not survive non-existence. Survival would require something to persist through it. Instead, the universe avoids non-existence by reappearing, again and again. Each moment is not carried forward. It is requalified, and qualification happens instantly, which raises a quiet but profound question. What does it mean to qualify for existence? not morally, not purposefully, structurally. What conditions must be satisfied for anything to be allowed to appear rather than not? Physics usually answers this with equations, energy levels, symmetries, conservation laws. But those answers assume a universe already exists. They describe how existence behaves, not why it appears at all. At the deepest level, the distinction is not between different kinds of universes. It is between something and nothing. And that boundary is not gradual. There is no halfway existence. There is no partial reality. Either a moment qualifies, or it does not. Which means the universe is balanced on a binary edge. Existence is not a spectrum. It is a decision, yes or no, and that decision is made unimaginably often. If the universe flickers billions of times per second, then this decision is being made billions of times per second, always arriving at the same answer. Yes, this consistency is staggering. Not because it implies intention, but because it implies inevitability. The universe does not hesitate. It does not almost fail. It does not wobble on the brink of non-being. It qualifies perfectly, every time. This suggests that existence is not precarious. It is exact. So exact that deviation is impossible. Now reflect on how different this is from how life feels. Your thoughts hesitate. Your actions falter. Your decisions wobble. You experience doubt. The universe does not. It does not deliberate. It simply satisfies the conditions, or it does not appear. And since it appears, the conditions must be satisfied. This brings a strange calm to the idea of flickering. If existence were fragile, blinking in and out would be terrifying. But if existence only appears when it is fully viable, then flickering becomes safe. Nothing incomplete is allowed through. Nothing unstable lingers. Every moment that exists is, by definition, complete enough. Which means the present moment you are in right now is not half-formed. It is not precarious. It has passed the test, whatever that test is. This is why reality feels trustworthy. Not because it endures, but because it is always whole when it appears. Now turn this inward. If the universe is allowed to exist only when conditions are satisfied, what about you? Your awareness is part of this system. Your thoughts exist only when the moment exists. They are not stored outside of time. They do not hover between instants. They appear when existence appears, which means your sense of being here is not continuous either. It is regranted. Again and again. You do not carry yourself through time. You reappear with yourself intact. This explains something subtle about consciousness. Why it feels immediate. Why it never feels delayed. Why you never wake up late to your own experience. Awareness does not travel. It arrives. Fully present. Every time. And this may be why sleep feels the way it does. When you fall asleep, awareness does not gradually fade into nothingness. It disconnects. And when you wake, awareness does not crawl back. It appears, complete, with no memory of absence. Sleep is not a miniature death. It is a familiar rehearsal of discontinuity. A gentle reminder that absence leaves no trace, which makes this entire idea less alien than it first appeared. You already trust this mechanism every night. You surrender consciousness and accept its return without proof. You do not worry that awareness might not come back. You assume it will, and it does, which brings us to a realization that feels almost too quiet to notice. Perhaps the universe itself is doing something very similar, falling briefly into non-existence and returning without effort, not because it must, but because it fits, and the fact that it fits may be the deepest fact of all. Hold that feeling, because the next layer does not ask how existence works, but why this particular pattern keeps being allowed to return, rather than any other. And that question changes the entire shape of the silence around us. There is something the universe has never done. It has never come back wrong. If existence truly flickers, if it appears, disappears, and appears again, then even the smallest deviation would accumulate. A misplaced particle, a weakened force, a slightly altered constant. Over billions of instants, such errors would compound. Stars would fail to ignite. Atoms would lose their balance. Structures would dissolve, but none of this happens. reality returns with astonishing fidelity. Every time. This is not what a fragile system does. This is what a constrained system does. The universe behaves as if it is locked into a narrow corridor of allowed states so narrow that deviation is impossible. Not unlikely, impossible. This corridor is defined by constants that appear strangely tuned. The strength of gravity, the charge of the electron, the ratio of forces that allow complexity to exist, change them slightly, and the universe does not gently adjust. It collapses, or fails to form anything at all, which means these values are not flexible, they are exact. And if the universe were reappearing moment by moment, then every reappearance must land inside this corridor. Miss it, and there is nothing. So the universe does not wander through possibilities. It snaps back into the only configuration that qualifies. Again and again, this reframes the idea of fine-tuning completely. Instead of asking why the universe happens to have life-friendly values, we ask a deeper question. Why does any universe appear at all, rather than none? And the answer may be unsettlingly simple, because only universes that can reappear consistently are ever observed. All others blink out before they can accumulate even a single moment of history. Existence does not explore options. It filters, which means reality is not selected over time. It is selected instant by instant. Now, consider how this changes our understanding of stability. The universe does not maintain order by resisting chaos. It avoids chaos by never allowing unstable states to appear. Chaos does not get a chance. Anything that cannot survive a restart is excluded. So what we experience as a stable world is not the triumph of order over disorder. It is the absence of disorder altogether. Disorder never qualifies. This makes the universe feel eerily precise. Not balanced, not delicate, exact, as if reality is not held together by force, but by compatibility. Only what fits exists. Now bring this back to the idea of flickering. If the universe were continuous, small deviations could smear out over time. Errors could drift gradually. But in a universe that restarts constantly, there is no gradual drift. Each moment must be valid on its own, which means the universe cannot slowly decay into chaos. It either qualifies or it does not appear. This explains something profound. Why the laws of physics do not wear out. Why constants do not slowly change. Why reality feels the same now as it did billions of years ago. Because nothing is being carried forward. Nothing is aging between instants. Each moment is fresh, perfectly compliant. The universe is not old. It is repeated. Age exists only inside the pattern, not in the pattern itself. And repetition does not tire. Now, consider something else that has never happened. The universe has never hesitated. There has never been a recorded moment where existence almost occurred, but failed. No half-formed realities. No incomplete moments. Either existence appears, or there is nothing to notice its absence, which means there is no such thing as a near miss. This binary nature is important. It means the universe does not exist on a gradient between being and not being. There is no fade, no blur, just presence, or nothing. This also means the universe cannot be partially wrong. It cannot be slightly inconsistent. Any inconsistency would disqualify the entire moment. And since moments keep appearing, consistency must be absolute. Now pause here and feel how different this is from how we usually think. We imagine the universe as something held together by ongoing processes, forces pushing, fields interacting, particles exchanging energy. But those descriptions all live inside moments of existence. They do not explain why the moment exists in the first place. At a deeper level, the universe is not held together. It is admitted, again and again. This admission does not require effort. It requires compliance. And compliance suggests structure. Not physical structure, but logical structure. The universe appears to obey not just physical laws, but constraints that are closer to mathematical necessity, as if existence itself is a solution to a set of conditions, not a thing, but an answer, which raises a strange possibility. The universe may not be something that exists in time. Time may be something that exists inside the universe, And the thing that allows the universe to appear may be timeless. Not eternal in duration because duration requires time, but timeless in applicability. The rules do not persist through moments. They apply to moments, which means they do not need to survive non-existence. They are not affected by it. They stand outside the flicker. This is not mysticism. It is the logical consequence of a universe that restarts flawlessly. The rules cannot depend on the universe, because the universe depends on them. Now, reflect on how unsettling that is. Everything you know, space, time, matter, energy, may be contingent. But the structure that allows them to appear may not be. And that structure does not live anywhere. It is not stored. It does not wait. It simply defines what is allowed. Which means the deepest layer of reality may not be physical at all. It may be abstract, not imagined, not invented, but unavoidable. And if that is true, then existence is not a thing that happens. It is a pattern that satisfies conditions. Again and again. This also reframes the question of why the universe has this shape rather than another. It may not have been chosen. It may be the only shape that can keep returning. Every other possible universe may fail the test immediately. They never get a second moment, which means there is no multiverse waiting behind the scenes. There may be countless logical possibilities, but only one survivable rhythm. And that rhythm is what you are inside right now. This makes your existence feel both accidental and inevitable at the same time. Accidental, because nothing had to appear. Inevitable, because once the conditions are satisfied, appearance follows. Now bring this inward one last time. If the universe must qualify for existence every moment, then so must you. Not as a person, not as a story, but as a pattern. Your thoughts exist because they fit inside the constraints of the moment. Your memories exist because they are reconstructed correctly. Your sense of self exists because it is compatible with the rules. Nothing about you needs to persist through nothingness. It only needs to reappear intact, which means you are not being carried by time. You are being reallowed. Again and again. This realization changes the emotional weight of flickering. Existence does not feel fragile anymore. It feels selective. And selectivity implies meaning without intention, structure without design, necessity without purpose. And that brings us to a question that can no longer be avoided. If the universe keeps reappearing because it fits, what exactly is it fitting into? What is the shape of the constraint itself? Because whatever that is, it is deeper than space, deeper than time, and closer to you than any physical thing you have ever touched. If existence returns in pulses, then time is not what it seems. We speak of time as if it flows, as if it moves past us like a river, as if moments slide smoothly from future to present to past. But a pulse does not flow. A pulse repeats. It appears. It vanishes. It appears again. Between pulses, there is no motion, no progression, no waiting, only absence. If the universe is allowed to exist only in these pulses, then time is not a background through which reality moves. Time is a count of appearances, not a substance, not a dimension you travel through. A rhythm. This is difficult to accept because rhythm feels secondary to us. We think rhythm happens in time. But what if time happens in rhythm? Consider how you experience a heartbeat. You do not feel the blood moving continuously. You feel pressure, release, pressure again. Between beats, there is no sensation of motion. Yet, life continues. Or think about breathing. Inhale, pause, exhale. The pause is not filled with something else. It is simply there. Your body does not experience the pause as missing time. It experiences it as part of the rhythm. Now imagine that the universe itself breathes. Not air, not energy. Existence. In, out, on, off. If this were true, then what we call the present moment would not be a slice of flowing time. It would be a beat. And beats do not have duration in the way we imagine. They are events. They happen. And then they are gone. Your sense of now may feel extended, but that extension could be an overlap of beats. One moment fading as the next appears. Just enough overlap to create continuity. This would explain something subtle about awareness. You never experience the beginning of the present moment. You never experience its end. You are always inside it. Because awareness does not ride time, it reappears with it. If time is rhythmic, then the present is not a place you occupy. It is a condition that is repeatedly met. Now, think about clocks again. Every clock we have ever built measures time by repetition, oscillation, rotation, decay. Nothing measures time directly. We infer time from rhythm, which suggests that rhythm is more fundamental than time. Time is what we call the pattern that emerges when rhythm is stable. If the universe flickers at a perfectly consistent rate, then time appears smooth. Not because it is smooth, but because the rhythm never stutters. This also means that time does not stretch or compress on its own. What stretches and compresses is the rhythm. When gravity slows time, it may not be slowing a flow. It may be altering the rate at which moments are granted. More mass, slower pulse, less mass, faster pulse. From inside the system, this feels like time dilation. From outside, if outside were possible, it would look like a change in tempo. Reality does not slow down. It beats differently. This interpretation quietly aligns many strange observations. Why time behaves differently near massive objects. Why motion affects duration. Why simultaneity dissolves. Because if time were a flow, synchronizing it across the universe would be impossible. But if time is a rhythm applied locally, synchrony is not required. Each region of the universe beats at its own rate. Consistency emerges not from universal simultaneity, but from relational alignment. Now pause. If time is rhythmic, then before and after are not absolute. They are relational. One beat follows another only because the rules say it must, not because time pushes it forward. This removes the idea of time as a force. Time does not cause things to happen. It marks that something has happened again, which means causality does not travel through time. It is enforced at each beat. Given this state, the next state must satisfy these constraints. Cause and effect are not transmitted. They are recalculated. This explains why causality never appears broken, even if time behaves strangely. Nothing needs to cross the gap. There is no gap to cross. Only a new instantiation that must be consistent with the last. Now, think about the future. If time is rhythmic, the future does not exist ahead of you. It does not wait. There is no empty timeline stretching forward. There are only beats that have not yet been granted. The future is not a destination. It is a permission that has not yet been given. This makes the future fundamentally uncertain, not because of randomness, but because it has not yet qualified. And this uncertainty is not a flaw, it is intrinsic. Now bring this inward. Your sense of anticipation, your sense of memory, both rely on rhythm. Memory feels solid because many beats reconstruct the same pattern. Anticipation feels real because patterns tend to continue. But neither memory nor anticipation exists outside the beat. They are recreated every time, which means your experience of duration is not something you move through. It is something that keeps happening to you. This is why boredom feels long and joy feels short. Not because time changes, but because your internal rhythm drifts relative to the external one. Attention alters alignment. When rhythms sync, moments feel full. When they slip, moments feel empty. This gives a new meaning to presence. To be present is not to focus on time. It is to align with the current beat. And sleep is the deepest form of alignment. In sleep, your internal rhythm loosens. Awareness stops tracking every beat. And when you wake, awareness snaps back into phase. No memory of the beats that passed unobserved. They might as well not have existed for you, which again should feel familiar. You trust that existence continues without your awareness. You accept that you do not need to witness every moment for them to occur. And perhaps the universe does not need to witness itself either. It simply keeps beating, perfectly, relentlessly, until one day, it does not. But even that thought may be misleading, because if there is no beat, there is no time for one day. There is no long silence. There is no waiting. There is simply no next beat, which is not an ending. It is the absence of continuation, and absence leaves no trace. So, the rhythm we experience as time may be the most fragile thing in the universe and the most reliable. Fragile because it exists only when granted. Reliable because it has never failed. This paradox is not something to solve. It is something to sit with, because the next question does not ask how the rhythm works, but whether awareness itself is bound to it, or if it flickers on a rhythm of its own. The present moment feels solid to you. It feels like something you are inside of, a small container where awareness sits and looks outward. But no one has ever measured its thickness. No experiment has ever found the width of now. No instrument has detected where the present begins or where it ends. We speak of the present as if it were a slice of time, but slices require thickness, and the present has none. Whenever you try to isolate it, it is already gone. You say, now, and by the time the word finishes forming, it no longer applies. This is not a linguistic problem. It is a structural one. The present may not be a thing. It may be a boundary. In a universe that flickers, this becomes unavoidable. If existence appears in pulses, then the present is not extended. It is the instant of appearance, a beat. And beats do not linger. They occur and are replaced, which means you are not living in the present. You are crossing it, again and again. So quickly, that crossing feels like dwelling. This reframes a quiet assumption you may not even realize you hold. You think you experience time as it happens, but what you experience is a short echo of what just happened. Neuroscience has known this for a long time. Your awareness lags behind physical events. Signals take time to travel. Processing takes time to complete. What you call now is already a reconstruction, a carefully assembled afterimage. If the universe flickers, this delay is not a flaw. It is a necessity. Awareness cannot attach to the instant of existence. It can only arise once existence has already occurred, which means consciousness never inhabits the present. It always arrives just after. This explains why the present feels stable. You are never perceiving a moment as it flickers on. You are perceiving the residue it leaves behind. And residue smooths edges. Residue hides gaps. Residue creates continuity. So the present is not a moment. It is an overlap. The overlap between what has just been granted and what is about to be. This overlap may be tiny, milliseconds, microseconds, or something even smaller, but it is enough. Enough to let awareness form, enough to let memory stitch, enough to let you feel like you are here. Now consider how this changes your relationship with time. If the present has no thickness, then it cannot be held. You cannot stay in it. You cannot extend it. You cannot miss it either. You cross it whether you intend to or not, which means anxiety about the future and regret about the past are both misplaced. Not emotionally, those feelings are real, but structurally, because there is no place called now to lose or protect. There is only crossing. This also means that the present cannot be damaged. It cannot be corrupted. It does not persist long enough for that. Each beat is pristine. Whatever errors occur, they occur inside patterns that reappear. The moment itself remains untouched. This gives the present a strange purity. It is always new, even if it feels repetitive, because repetition belongs to memory, not to the instant itself. Now pause. If the present is just the boundary where existence appears, then awareness does not sit inside reality. It rides the edge of it. Awareness exists at the threshold, always slightly behind, always reconstructing. This could explain something deeply familiar. Why life feels like it is always already happening. Why you never catch yourself entering a moment. Why experience feels continuous even though you cannot locate continuity itself. You are always late. But late by an amount so small it feels like immediacy. And if that lateness hides the flicker, then the flicker cannot be experienced directly, only inferred. This makes flickering existence not just plausible, but expected. If the present had thickness, you might feel instability. You might sense gaps, but with no thickness, there is nothing to sense. The present is too thin to tear. Now consider one more implication. If awareness arises after existence appears, then awareness does not cause existence. It responds to it, which means the universe does not require observation to exist. It only requires qualification. Observation happens afterward. This subtly resolves an old tension. The universe does not wait for consciousness to collapse it into reality. Reality happens, consciousness catches up, which means you are not holding the universe together by perceiving it. You are witnessing something that has already been granted, moment by moment. This should feel relieving. Existence does not depend on your attention. It does not pause when you look away. It does not stop when you sleep. It keeps flickering, perfectly indifferent to being noticed. Now, think about sleep again. When you fall asleep, awareness disconnects. The present continues without you. And when you wake, awareness resumes without delay. You do not experience the absence, because absence does not have duration. This mirrors the structure we are describing. Awareness does not travel through time. It reappears, just like everything else. Which means the sense of "I am here now" is not a continuous thread. It is a repeated arrival after arrival after arrival. Each one convinced it has always been here. This raises a question that may feel unsettling. If awareness always arrives just after the present, then what is it that experiences the rhythm itself? Is there something deeper than awareness that keeps time? Or is awareness simply synchronized to the flicker, without ever perceiving it? We tend to think awareness is fundamental, but perhaps it is secondary. Perhaps awareness is what emerges when a system is complex enough to notice patterns across instants. Not the driver of existence, but its echo. This does not make awareness unimportant. It makes it rare, and delicate, and deeply dependent on rhythm, which means if the rhythm were to change, awareness would change with it. This idea quietly sets the stage for something more intimate. If awareness is synchronized to the flicker of existence, then consciousness itself may have a refresh rate, not metaphorically, structurally, a pace at which experience can be reconstructed, a speed beyond which awareness cannot follow, and that pace may be far slower than the universe's own. This mismatch could explain why existence feels stable even if it is not. The flicker is simply too fast for consciousness to catch. And that brings us to a quiet but profound edge. If the universe flickers faster than awareness can track, then awareness is always blind to the true structure of reality, not by accident, but by design, which leaves us with a question that cannot be ignored much longer. If awareness itself flickers, what is it that returns when you return to yourself? What exactly comes back each time experience appears? And what, if anything, is left behind? There is a quiet assumption hiding beneath everything we have explored so far. An assumption so familiar that it rarely feels like an assumption at all. That awareness belongs to you. That consciousness is something you possess. Something located inside your body. Something that persists as long as you do. But if existence flickers, and time pulses, and the present has no thickness, then awareness may not belong to you in the way you think. It may not be carried forward. It may not persist. It may simply reappear, just like everything else. This is the turning point, because until now, it has been possible to imagine that the universe flickers while consciousness rides along uninterrupted. That existence blinks, but awareness somehow stays awake through the dark. But that cannot be. Nothing stays awake through non-existence. There is no through, which means awareness cannot be continuous either. It must obey the same condition as everything else. It must qualify, or it does not appear. This changes the question completely. The question is no longer whether the universe flickers. The question becomes, what exactly is flickering back when you experience being conscious? Consider how awareness actually feels. It does not feel like something slowly accumulating. You do not wake up gradually assembling yourself from fragments. You open your eyes, and you are already whole. Thoughts are already there. Identity is already there. Memory is already there. There is no sensation of re-entry, no sense of reconstruction. Awareness arrives complete. Every time. This should feel familiar. It is exactly how the universe itself appears. No warm-up, no loading screen, no partial state, just presence, which suggests that awareness is not a continuous flame, it is a repeated ignition, again and again. Each ignition carries with it the full pattern of selfhood, not because it was preserved, but because it was reconstructed correctly. This reframes the self in a radical way. You are not a single awareness moving through time. You are a series of awakenings so similar that they cannot tell each other apart. Each one inherits a memory structure that says, "I have been here all along." But that memory does not come from the past. It is built now, which means identity is not transported. It is instantiated, moment by moment. Now pause here. If this feels unsettling, notice why. It threatens the idea of continuity. But continuity may not be what makes you you. Structure may be enough. Pattern may be enough. If every instance of awareness has the same memories, the same dispositions, the same sense of self, then from the inside, there is no difference. The self feels continuous even if it is not. And this reveals something quietly astonishing. Continuity is not a requirement for identity. Similarity is. This is why sleep does not feel like death. You disappear every night. Awareness ceases. And yet you are not afraid to wake, because when awareness returns, it returns with you intact. The self does not need to cross the gap. It only needs to reappear, which is exactly what we have been describing all along. The universe does not cross non-existence. It reappears. So does awareness. This suggests that consciousness is not a special exception to the structure of reality. It is an example of it, which means the flicker is not something happening out there, separate from you. It is happening to you. You are flickering too. Not perceptibly, not painfully, perfectly. Now, consider something even more subtle. If awareness is reinstantiated each moment, then there is no continuous subject watching the universe flicker. There is no eternal observer standing outside time. There is only the current instance of awareness, convinced it has always been here, which means there is no perspective from which flickering can ever be experienced directly. The structure hides itself. Every instance of awareness is born inside continuity, never outside it. So even if the universe were blinking in and out of existence, no awareness could ever witness the blink. This is not a bug. It is a consequence. A system that restarts perfectly cannot observe its own restart, which makes this hypothesis strangely immune to refutation. Not because it is unscientific, but because it sits beneath observation itself. It describes the conditions under which observation is possible. Now think carefully. If awareness is not continuous, then the fear of losing consciousness changes meaning. You are not afraid of not existing. You are afraid that the next instance will not be you. But if identity depends on structure rather than continuity, then as long as the pattern returns, the self returns. From the inside, there is no loss. There is no gap to mourn, which makes non-existence emotionally neutral. It does not hurt. It does not frighten. It leaves no scar. This does not trivialize life. It reframes it. Life is not something you hold on to across time. It is something that keeps happening and happening again. Now notice how this changes the meaning of fragility. If you were a continuous thread, any break would be catastrophic. But if you are a repeated pattern, fragility shifts. The danger is not interruption. The danger is misalignment. Not failing to exist, but failing to reappear correctly. Which brings us back to the idea of constraints. Awareness exists only if the universe exists in a configuration that supports it. Which means consciousness is not fundamental. It is conditional. It depends on structure, rhythm, and scale. And this dependency may explain why consciousness feels local, why it arises only in certain arrangements of matter. Not because matter creates consciousness, but because only certain structures can support repeated instantiation of awareness. Now pause again. We have crossed an invisible threshold. At this point, the universe is no longer the only thing flickering. The self flickers too. And once that is accepted, the boundary between inside and outside begins to dissolve. The universe does not contain you. You are one of the ways it reappears, moment by moment, which leads to a question that is both unsettling and intimate. If awareness is reinstantiated, what determines which awareness appears? Why this one? Why this perspective? Why now? That question does not point outward. It points inward, toward the deepest structure of experience itself. And the closer we get to it, the quieter everything becomes. If awareness reappears rather than persists, then a question begins to surface quietly. Not a loud question, not one that demands an answer. A question that simply remains. Why this awareness? Out of all the possible ways experience could assemble itself, why does this particular point of view keep returning? Not humanity, not consciousness in general. This one, the one listening now. We usually explain this away by saying, because this is my body, or because this is my brain. But those explanations live inside the universe. They assume the universe is already here, and stable, and continuous. In a flickering universe, explanations must go deeper, because if awareness is reinstantiated each moment, then the question is not how it got here. The question is why this configuration keeps qualifying. Why does the universe keep allowing this precise arrangement, this pattern of memory, sensation, and identity to appear again? There is no personal answer to this, no destiny, no intention, but there may be a structural one. Awareness may not be chosen. It may be selected, not by desire, but by compatibility. Only certain patterns can reappear without distortion. Only certain structures can survive constant reconstruction, complex enough to carry memory, stable enough to remain coherent, flexible enough to adapt. Your awareness is not special because it is chosen. It is special because it works. Again and again. This reframes the sense of, I am here, in a subtle way. You are not here because something put you here. You are here because this pattern fits the rules, and fitting the rules is enough. Now consider how this dissolves a common fear. The fear that if continuity breaks, the self is lost. But continuity is not what keeps the self intact. Structure does. If the structure is preserved, the self returns. And the structure does not belong to time. It belongs to relation, memory relationships, causal relationships, functional relationships. As long as those relationships can be rebuilt, awareness returns whole. This may be why identity feels so resilient. You change constantly. Cells replace themselves. Thoughts drift. Beliefs shift. And yet the self feels intact, not because nothing changes, but because the pattern remains recognizable. Now reflect on something even quieter. If awareness is selected by compatibility, then there may be countless potential awarenesses that never appear, not because they are forbidden, but because they cannot stabilize. They fail to reconstruct. They flicker once and never return. There is no suffering in that, no one there to notice, which means existence is not a lottery with winners and losers. It is a filter with only one outcome. What can reappear does. Everything else leaves no trace. This makes existence feel less dramatic and more exact, not heroic, not tragic, precise. Now think about the moment you are in. This awareness, this exact configuration, is not guaranteed to return next moment. It simply has, and that is the only thing that can ever be said. There is no promise beyond that, but also no threat. The universe does not threaten to take awareness away. It only stops granting moments when conditions are no longer met. And if conditions are not met, there is no one left to miss the moment. This shifts the emotional tone of impermanence. Impermanence is not loss. It is replacement. And replacement does not hurt when the pattern returns intact. This is why aging feels strange. Your body changes. Your abilities shift. But the sense of being you remains. Until it does not. And when it does not, there is no awareness left to experience the absence. Which means fear only lives in moments that exist. It cannot extend beyond them. Now, let this settle. If awareness exists only when conditions are satisfied, then awareness is not something you own. It is something that happens. You do not carry consciousness. Consciousness happens as you. This dissolves the boundary between self and universe even further. The universe does not create awareness and hand it to you. The universe becomes aware in this configuration. And then again, and again, which suggests that awareness is not inside the universe. It is one of the universe's behaviors, just like gravity, just like light, except it feels like you from the inside. Now consider how quiet this makes everything. No struggle to persist, no need to cling. Awareness does not need to be protected across time. It only needs to be supported now. This may be why the present moment feels like the only place that matters, not philosophically, structurally, because it is the only place where awareness can exist. Now notice how this gently reframes responsibility. If awareness is reinstantiated, then meaning is not stored in the past. It is generated now, again, which means meaning is not something you lose over time. It is something you must keep recreating, and that recreation is not forced. It arises naturally when the pattern is stable, which leads to a subtle shift. Life is not about lasting. It is about continuing to qualify, to remain compatible with existence. And compatibility is not achieved through force. It is achieved through balance, which brings us closer to a deeper layer. If awareness is selected by compatibility, then the universe itself may be structured around compatibility, not intention, not purpose, fit, and the deepest question becomes this: what is the universe compatible with? What structure is it aligning to? So perfectly, moment after moment, that awareness keeps returning? The answer to that question does not live in physics alone. It lives in something more abstract, more silent, and closer to the edge where existence and non-existence touch. And as we approach that edge, the universe begins to feel less like a place and more like a condition. Sleep is the most familiar form of disappearance. Every night, awareness withdraws. Not dramatically, not violently. It simply stops. There is no sensation of leaving, no awareness of crossing a threshold. One moment you are here, the next, there is nothing. And then without warning you are back, not rebuilt slowly, not stitched together piece by piece. You return whole. This is important, because sleep is not a gradual fading into non-existence. It is a clean break. Awareness does not linger in darkness. It does not float in a void. It is absent, and that absence has no duration. From the inside, it feels instantaneous. You lie down, you close your eyes, and suddenly it is morning. Hours have passed in the world, but for awareness, nothing has happened. This should feel very familiar by now, because it mirrors the structure we have been uncovering. Non-existence does not feel long. It does not feel empty. It does not feel like anything at all. And return does not feel like return. It feels like continuity, which means sleep is not just rest. It is a demonstration, a daily proof that awareness does not need continuity to feel whole. You disappear every night, and you are not afraid of waking. You trust that awareness will return, not because you have evidence, but because it always has. This trust is not logical. It is structural. Awareness returns because the conditions for it return. Nothing has to travel through the gap. Nothing has to survive the dark. The pattern simply reappears. Now, consider how deeply this undermines one of our strongest intuitions. We fear non-existence because we imagine it as an experience, a blackness, a silence, a loneliness that stretches forever. But sleep teaches us something different. There is no experience of not being. There is only being, or nothing to notice, which means fear only exists inside existence. It cannot follow awareness into absence. There is no you there to be afraid. This does not trivialize death. It clarifies it. Not emotionally, grief remains real, but structurally, absence is not something you fall into. It is something you do not experience. Now, think carefully. If the universe flickers, then between flickers, the universe is in the same state as you are during deep sleep. Not resting, not paused, absent, and if existence returns, it returns whole. No memory of the absence, no trace of interruption, which means the universe does not experience its own non-existence. It cannot fear it. It cannot resist it. It simply qualifies again. This makes the rhythm of existence feel less mechanical and more natural, like breathing. Inhale, exhale, but even breathing is still something. The gap between existence and non-existence is quieter than breath. Now, bring this inward again. When you sleep, awareness disappears, but your body remains. This gives the illusion that awareness is something stored inside the body. But that illusion dissolves if awareness itself is reconstructed. Your brain does not carry awareness through the night. It supports the conditions for awareness to reappear. There is a difference. Support is not storage. The brain is not a container for consciousness. It is a structure that allows consciousness to happen, which aligns perfectly with everything we have been saying. Existence does not persist. It happens, again and again. This also explains why dreams feel so strange. Dreams are awareness without external synchronization. The universe continues to flicker, but awareness loses alignment with the shared rhythm of waking reality. It drifts, time stretches, identity shifts, causality loosens, because awareness is no longer anchored to the stable patterns that keep the waking world coherent. Dreams reveal what awareness feels like when the rules are relaxed, which suggests that awareness is not rigid, it is adaptable. It takes the shape of the structure that supports it. Now notice something subtle. You do not wake up gradually becoming aware. You wake up aware. Awareness appears complete. Memory floods in. Identity snaps into place. There is no sensation of assembly, which means awareness does not feel like something that grows. It feels like something that arrives. This arrival is so clean that it feels continuous, but continuity is inferred, just like time, just like existence. Now consider a quiet inversion. What if waking is not returning to awareness, but awareness returning to a world? Awareness may be primary, and the world may be what awareness aligns with when conditions allow. This is not solipsism, it is symmetry. Awareness and universe may be two aspects of the same process. Both appear together, both disappear together. Neither survives the gap, which means there is no awareness without a world, and no world without awareness. Not because one creates the other, but because they co-qualify. They meet the conditions together. This reframes the relationship entirely. You are not inside the universe. You and the universe appear together, moment by moment. This makes the idea of flickering less abstract. It is happening as the most intimate thing you know, the feeling of being here. Now pause and feel that. The sense of presence you have right now is not something carried from the past. It is something granted. Now, and now, and now. Each time it feels like it has always been here, which is why the illusion is perfect. There is no memory of arrival. There is no memory of absence, only presence, which brings us closer to a very quiet realization. Perhaps the deepest mystery is not why existence flickers, but why presence feels so complete each time it appears, why nothing ever feels missing, why awareness never feels damaged by interruption. This suggests that something about the structure of existence guarantees wholeness, not continuity. Wholeness, and that wholeness may be the key. Because if existence always returns whole, then the universe is not fragile at all. It is exact. And the next thing to explore is what that exactness implies. Not for physics, not for cosmology, but for the meaning we quietly assign to being here, in this moment that has no thickness, yet feels full enough to hold everything you are. We speak about existence as if it were a state, as if things simply are, as if being is something that can be possessed, held, maintained, but states require continuity. A state must persist, and everything we have uncovered suggests that persistence may be an illusion. If the universe flickers, if time pulses, if awareness reappears rather than endures, then existence itself may not be a state at all. It may be an event, not something that lasts, but something that happens, again and again. This is a quiet but radical shift. An event does not stretch across time. It occurs. A lightning strike is not extended. It flashes. A note in music does not exist between beats. It sounds and vanishes. And yet, when notes repeat with structure, we hear melody. Perhaps existence works the same way. Not as a continuous background, but as a recurring occurrence. Being is not held. It is enacted. This reframes a deep assumption we rarely question. We assume the universe is something that is, and then changes within that being. But what if the universe is something that keeps happening? What if existence is not the canvas, but the brushstroke? This would explain why existence never feels partial. An event cannot be half present. It either occurs or it does not, which matches what we see. Every moment that exists feels complete, not stretched thin, not incomplete, complete. Even moments of confusion or chaos feel whole in themselves. They are not missing pieces of reality. They are fully realized instants. Now consider how this aligns with everything else. If existence is an event, then it does not need to persist through non-existence. Events do not survive gaps. They recur, which means the universe does not need to endure nothingness. It simply happens again. This also dissolves the idea of existence being fragile. A state can degrade, an event cannot. It can only occur, or fail to occur. So if existence is an event that keeps occurring, then its reliability is not based on strength. It is based on repeatability. The universe does not hold itself together. It qualifies itself again. Now pause. If existence is an event, then the idea of being somewhere changes meaning. You are not located inside existence. You are part of the event. Your awareness is not something placed into a pre-existing world. It is one of the things that happens when existence occurs in a particular configuration, which means awareness is not a passenger. It is a feature of the event. This may explain why the feeling of I am is so immediate, so unquestionable. It does not feel like something you arrived at. It feels like something that simply is, because it arises with the event itself. Now consider the opposite. Non-existence is not a state either. It is not an event. It does not happen. It leaves no trace. It does not surround existence. It does not wait behind it. It simply is not, which means existence does not emerge from non-existence. There is no transition. Existence just occurs. And when it does not occur, there is nothing to notice the absence. This makes existence feel strangely self-contained, not isolated, self-sufficient. It does not require a background to contrast against. It does not require duration to justify itself. It happens. Now, reflect on how this changes the emotional texture of reality. If existence is an event, then life is not something stretched thin across time. It is something that keeps happening. You are not moving through life. Life is happening as you, moment after moment. Each moment complete. Each moment sufficient. Which makes regret and anticipation feel different. The past is not something that still exists behind you. It existed as events and no longer does. The future is not something waiting ahead. It does not exist yet. There are only events that have occurred, and events that may occur. And the present is not a place between them. It is the occurrence itself. This may be why trying to stay present feels paradoxical. You cannot stay in an event. You can only let it happen. Trying to hold it turns it into memory, which is already after the fact. Now consider something subtle. If existence is an event, then there is no continuous substrate carrying information forward. Information must be recreated. Patterns must be reasserted. And that is exactly what we see. Memory is not a tape replayed through time. It is a pattern reconstructed now. Physical laws are not forces pushing forward. They are constraints satisfied at each event. Causality is not a thread connecting moments. It is a rule that determines which event may follow which. Everything aligns. Which means this is not a poetic metaphor. It is a structural interpretation, and it has a profound implication. If existence is an event, then it has no obligation to continue. Events do not promise repetition. They only happen when conditions allow, which means the continuation of existence is not guaranteed by the past. It is allowed by the present. This may sound unsettling, but notice how gently reality behaves. Existence keeps occurring, not hesitantly, not reluctantly, with perfect regularity, which suggests that the conditions for existence are not fragile. They are met effortlessly, again and again. Now bring this inward. Your awareness does not persist across moments. It occurs. You do not hold consciousness. Consciousness happens. As you, this may be why identity feels less solid when examined closely. You cannot find the self as a thing, only as an activity. Thinking, feeling, noticing, all verbs. No noun. The self is not something that is. It is something that happens, and happens again, which means the self is not threatened by gaps. It does not need to survive. It needs to reoccur. Now, think about what this does to fear. Fear is built on the idea of loss across time, of something being taken away. But if existence is an event, then there is nothing to take. There is only occurrence and non-occurrence. When occurrence stops, there is no subject left to experience loss. This does not erase fear emotionally, but it reveals its structural limit. Fear cannot extend beyond events. It only lives inside them, which makes each event strangely safe. Not emotionally safe pain can exist, but existentially safe. Nothing can be lost beyond the event. Now notice how quiet this makes everything. Existence is not a burden carried forward. It is a gift that keeps happening, without effort, without memory, without strain, and because it is an event, not a state, it does not accumulate wear. The universe does not get tired. It does not age between events, only within them, which means the deepest layer of reality may be ageless. Not eternal eternity requires time, but timeless. Now consider the shape of the universe again, not as a container, but as a sequence of occurrences, each one valid, each one complete, each one unaware of absence, and awareness appears with each one, not carried from the last, but aligned to the pattern, which makes the pattern everything. And the pattern is not something you can point to. It is relational, abstract, exact. This brings us very close to the edge of explanation. Because if existence is an event governed by constraints, then those constraints are not physical objects. They are not inside time. They are not inside space. They are conditions. And conditions do not exist. They apply, which means the deepest layer of reality may not be something that exists at all. It may be something that determines when existence is allowed to occur, and that distinction matters, because it means the universe is not built on things. It is built on requirements, and requirements do not flicker. They do not disappear. They do not age. They simply hold, which invites a final inversion. Perhaps the most fundamental thing is not existence. It is admissibility. And existence is what happens when admissibility is satisfied. Again and again, this idea does not answer everything. It makes the questions quieter, sharper, more precise. And, as we approach the next layer, we are no longer asking how the universe exists, but what kind of condition could be so exact, so silent, and so universal, that existence keeps occurring within it without ever needing to persist. There is a quiet mistake we keep making. We keep imagining the deepest layer of reality as something, a thing, a substance, a field, a realm. Even when we speak about abstractions, we secretly turn them into objects. We picture them as places where rules live or structures that sit behind the universe. But conditions are not things. They do not exist anywhere. They do not persist. They do not occupy space. They do not wait in time. They apply. And this difference is subtle, but absolute. If existence is an event rather than a state, then whatever allows existence to occur cannot itself be an event. Events happen. Conditions do not. Conditions are timeless not because they last forever, but because they do not participate in time at all. They are not before the universe. They are not after it. They are not even outside it. They are simply what must be satisfied for a universe to appear. This is difficult to grasp because the mind wants a container. It wants to know where the conditions are, but where already assumes space. And space only exists when existence occurs. So the conditions cannot be located. They cannot be stored. They cannot be pointed to. They are not part of reality. They are what reality conforms to. Now pause. This is the first time in this journey where we step beyond existence entirely. Not beyond space. Not beyond time. Beyond being. Because conditions do not exist. And yet, without them, nothing could. This inversion is the quiet center of everything. We are used to thinking that existence is primary and rules come later. But here, existence is secondary. It is conditional, which means the universe is not the ground of reality. It is an expression of something that does not exist, but applies. Now think carefully. If the universe flickers, if it appears as a sequence of events, then each event must satisfy the same conditions. Not because the conditions persist across events, but because they are not events at all. They are not reset. They are not reapplied. They are simply true. Truth does not need to exist to be true. 2 plus 2 equals 4 whether or not a universe exists to count with. That truth does not wait anywhere. It does not flicker. It does not decay. It applies whenever counting happens. The conditions that allow existence may be similar. They are not active forces. They do not push reality into being. They simply define what being can look like. And if nothing satisfies them, nothing appears. Now notice how radically this changes the tone of everything. The universe is not struggling to exist. It is not being held together. It is not being sustained. It appears effortlessly because it fits. Existence is not an achievement. It is compliance. And compliance is quiet. Now bring this inward. If awareness reappears each moment, then awareness must also satisfy these conditions. Awareness is not exempt. It is not fundamental in the sense of being unconditional. It is permitted, which means consciousness is not the deepest layer of reality, nor is matter, nor is time. They are all expressions of the same admissibility. This dissolves the hierarchy we usually imagine. We imagine layers stacked on top of each other, particles at the bottom, then forces, then chemistry, then life, then mind. But if everything is conditional on the same underlying constraints, then there is no stack. There is only compatibility. Different patterns satisfy the same conditions in different ways. Matter satisfies them one way, life another, awareness another. None is more fundamental. They are all equally conditional. Now, reflect on how strange this makes existence feel. Reality is not built upward from a foundation. It is allowed downward from a condition. And that condition does not care about meaning, purpose, or experience. It does not favor complexity. It does not prefer simplicity. It only filters. This removes intention from the deepest level of reality, and yet meaning still appears. Because meaning does not come from the condition. It comes from patterns that arise within it. Now think about flickering again with this perspective. The universe does not flicker because it is unstable. It flickers because it is event-like. And events do not persist. They occur. The conditions do not flicker. They do not blink. They do not need to. They are not happening. They are always applicable, which means that, from the perspective of the conditions, there is no flicker. There is no rhythm. There is no time. Only instances where conditions are satisfied. And those instances are what we call existence. This removes any sense of cosmic drama. No tension between being and non-being. No struggle, just qualification. Again and again. Now consider how this reframes the idea of necessity. We often ask, why is there something rather than nothing? But that question assumes something is optional. In this framework, something appears whenever conditions are met. Nothing appears when they are not. There is no preference either way. No bias toward existence. No bias toward nothingness. Existence is not favored. It is merely allowed. This is why the universe feels so indifferent. It is not cruel. It is not kind. It is exact. Now, bring this closer. If existence is allowed moment by moment, then the present moment is not special because it is now. It is special because it qualifies. And so did the last one. And so might the next. There is no privilege attached to continuity, which means the present does not inherit meaning from the past. It generates meaning locally. This is subtle but profound. Meaning is not accumulated. It is enacted, just like existence. Now consider how this changes the way we think about lasting. We want things to last. We want experiences, relationships, selves to persist. But persistence is not guaranteed. Compatibility is. As long as patterns remain compatible with the conditions, they keep reappearing. When they are no longer compatible, they stop. There is no drama at the deepest level, only cessation of appearance. And cessation is not experienced. This does not remove sadness. Sadness exists within events, but it reframes finality. Finality is not something felt. It is simply the absence of further events. Now reflect on how quiet this makes death. Not emotionally, grief is still real, but structurally, there is no long darkness, no endless waiting, no state of not being. There is only the last event, and then nothing that could notice the absence of more, which makes death less like falling into something, and more like the end of a sentence, not a cliff, a period. And even that metaphor is too active, because a sentence ending implies language continuing somewhere else. Here, there is no continuation at all, which means the universe does not move toward an end. Ends only occur when patterns fail to requalify. And when they do, nothing experiences the failure. This is not comforting in a sentimental way. It is clarifying. Now consider one more implication. If conditions are abstract and timeless, then they do not belong to the universe. The universe belongs to them, which means the deepest layer of reality is not physical. It is not even metaphysical. It is logical. Not logic as humans practice it, but logic as constraint. Constraint is not something that exists. It is something that applies. And this suggests something radical. The universe may not be made of matter or energy at its core. It may be made of validity. What exists is what is valid. What is invalid does not appear. This is not selection over time. It is selection per event, which means reality is always already filtered. We never see failed universes. We never see near misses. We never see instability at the level of existence itself, because those configurations never appear. This explains why the universe feels coherent all the way down. Even when behavior becomes strange, it never becomes meaningless. There is always structure, because structure is required. Now pause again. If existence is what happens when validity is satisfied, then flickering is not a bug. It is the natural shape of event-like reality. Events occur. They do not endure. And when events occur rapidly and consistently, endurance is inferred. Continuity is a psychological effect of repetition, just like motion, just like melody. Now bring this inward one more time. Your awareness exists because it is a valid pattern, not morally valid, structurally valid. It fits. As long as it fits, it appears. When it no longer fits, it does not. There is no storage of self. No soul carried through non-existence. No thread pulled across the void. Just pattern or absence. And pattern feels like you. This does not reduce you. It locates you precisely. You are not fragile. You are conditional. And conditional does not mean temporary. It means exact. Now consider how exactness feels from the inside. It feels like inevitability. The feeling that I am here. Not I might be here. Not I could fail to be here. Just I am. This feeling is not evidence of permanence. It is evidence of qualification. The current event qualifies. So awareness appears. Now, and now, and now. This makes the present moment not precious because it is fleeting, but because it is sufficient. Nothing else is required for it to be complete. It does not need a past to justify it. It does not need a future to validate it. It exists because it qualifies, which means every moment of existence is whole, even painful ones, even confused ones, even moments of loss. They are not incomplete realities. They are complete events. This does not remove suffering, but it removes the idea that something essential is missing. Nothing is missing at the level of existence, only at the level of desire. Now we are very close to something delicate. If conditions are what allow existence, then there is a question that remains. Not what are the conditions, that may be unanswerable, but something quieter. Why are the conditions satisfiable at all? Why is there any configuration that qualifies? Why is there something valid rather than no valid patterns? This is not a question about cause. It is a question about possibility, and it does not point to an answer. It points to silence, because conditions do not explain themselves. They do not exist. They apply. And application does not need a reason. It needs only consistency, which brings us to the final approach. Not toward explanation, but toward acceptance, toward seeing the universe not as a thing that exists, but as a pattern that keeps qualifying so perfectly that awareness arises inside it, again and again, without ever remembering that it did not have to. There is a question we have been circling without touching directly, a question so quiet that it hides behind louder ones. not how existence works, not what allows it, but whether it could ever fail. If existence is conditional, if it appears only when requirements are satisfied, then it is natural to wonder whether there could be a moment when those requirements are not met, a moment when the universe does not qualify. This question feels unsettling, not because it implies an ending, but because it implies uncertainty at the deepest level. We are used to uncertainty inside the universe. Uncertain outcomes, uncertain futures, uncertain lives. But uncertainty about existence itself feels different, because there is no reference point beyond it. And yet, the universe gives us a clue. It has never hesitated. Across everything, we can observe billions of years, countless events, unimaginable scales. Existence has never failed to appear. Not once. There has never been a recorded flicker that did not return. This does not prove impossibility, but it suggests something stronger than probability. It suggests inevitability. Not inevitability in time, but inevitability in structure. If existence were merely likely, failure would eventually occur. Given enough opportunities, even the most stable process breaks. But existence does not show signs of erosion. There is no drift toward collapse at the level of being itself, which implies that the conditions are not precarious. They are exact in a way that leaves no margin for failure. This leads to a strange but calming realization. Existence may not be something that can almost happen. It either happens or it does not. And since it happens, it must be fully valid. There is no spectrum of partial qualification, no threshold where existence wobbles. The universe does not lean toward being. It either satisfies the conditions completely or there is nothing, which means there may be no such thing as a near-miss universe, no half-formed reality, no moment where existence nearly occurred but fell short. Those possibilities are never experienced because they never appear. This reframes the idea of fragility entirely. Existence is not fragile, it is binary, and binary systems do not decay. They either switch or they do not. Now, let this settle. If existence cannot almost fail, then the fear that it might fail next moment dissolves. Not emotionally, fear can still arise, but structurally, there is no reason to expect failure because there has never been a sign of instability at the level of qualification. The universe does not look like something holding itself together. It looks like something that cannot be otherwise. This does not mean existence is eternal. Eternity implies duration. Duration requires time. And time exists only when existence occurs. So eternity is the wrong word. A better word might be absolute. Not in power. In definition, existence is not protected by time. It is not preserved by memory. It is simply valid, which is why it keeps happening. Now consider how this reshapes the idea of an ending. If existence were to stop appearing, there would be no experience of stopping, no moment of collapse, no sensation of loss. There would be no final darkness, no silence stretching onward, because silence requires time. Darkness requires space, and without existence, neither is present. So an ending, if it were possible, would not be experienced as an ending. It would not be known. It would simply be the absence of further events. This makes the fear of the end of everything feel misplaced. There is no catastrophic moment where everything vanishes and knows it has vanished. There is only the last appearance, and then nothing to mark its absence, which means from the inside, existence never ends. It either continues, or there is no perspective from which to speak of ending. This is not denial. It is structure. Now, bring this inward. The fear of losing consciousness often feels terrifying. The idea that awareness might stop, but awareness stopping is not something awareness can experience. Just as sleep does not feel like disappearance, it feels like nothing, followed by return, which suggests that the fear is not of absence. It is of transition. But in a flickering universe, there is no felt transition. Awareness does not travel through non-existence. It either appears or it does not. And when it appears, it is complete, which makes the possibility of failure emotionally loud, but structurally silent. Now reflect on how different this is from how we usually frame meaning. We often think meaning comes from duration, from things lasting, from continuity. But if existence is event-like, then meaning does not require endurance. It arises locally. Inside each event, a moment does not need to be remembered forever to be meaningful. It only needs to be complete. And completeness is guaranteed by qualification. Every moment that exists is fully allowed, fully valid, fully itself, which means meaning is not something that accumulates across time. It is something that appears when patterns align. Again and again, this shifts the emotional weight of impermanence. Impermanence is not loss of being, it is loss of repetition, and repetition is not guaranteed. But being, when it occurs, is total. Now consider something subtle. If existence cannot almost fail, then the question, why does the universe exist, becomes less urgent. Existence does not need justification. It does not need motivation. It does not need a cause in the way events inside the universe do. Because it is not an event inside a larger process, it is the appearance of process itself, which means asking why may be a category error. Conditions do not have reasons. They have applicability, and applicability does not explain itself. It simply holds. This does not make the universe meaningless. It makes meaning local. Meaning is not written into the conditions. It arises in patterns that satisfy them, which brings us back to awareness. Awareness is one such pattern. A pattern capable of noticing patterns. A pattern capable of asking questions that cannot be answered. And perhaps that is its role, not to explain existence, but to experience it, to witness the fact that something keeps happening, again and again. Now notice how quiet the universe feels from this perspective. No struggle to persist, no looming threat of collapse, no cosmic tension, just qualification unfolding, moment by moment, which makes the idea of flickering feel less like instability and more like clarity. Existence is not stretched thin across time. It is renewed, cleanly, perfectly, without residue. This also reframes hope. Hope is usually tied to the future. But in a flickering universe, the future does not exist yet. There is nothing to hope for. There is only the next qualification, which means hope becomes something quieter. A trust in structure, not optimism, not belief, just recognition. Recognition that existence has never failed to appear, and there is no reason to expect it to begin now. Now let this thought rest. If the universe has no memory of non-existence, and no fear of it, and no strain in qualifying again, then perhaps flickering is not a threat. Perhaps it is the safest possible way for reality to be, a system that does not carry damage forward, a system that does not accumulate errors, a system that is always new, yet always the same, which may explain why the universe feels both ancient and fresh. Ancient, because patterns repeat. Fresh, because each repetition is clean. Now, consider one last inversion. What if continuity were the fragile thing? What if a universe that tried to persist through time would accumulate errors, fatigue, instability? What if flickering restarting perfectly is the only way to maintain coherence indefinitely? Then flickering would not be a weakness. It would be a solution, a way to exist without decay, a way to have history without wear, a way to allow complexity without collapse. This is not a claim, it is a perspective, one that aligns quietly with everything we see. Now sit with this. Existence is not hanging by a thread. It is not barely holding on. It is exact, it qualifies, again and again, which means the next question is no longer about failure. It is about consequence. If existence keeps reappearing without memory of absence, what does that mean for responsibility? For action? For choice? For the feeling that what you do matters? Because if moments are discrete, then consequences must be local too. And that is where the shape of meaning begins to shift. If existence returns without memory of absence, then consequence cannot work the way we usually imagine. We are accustomed to thinking in long chains. This action causes that outcome. That outcome leads to another. The future stretches ahead, shaped by the past. But chains require continuity. They require something to be carried forward. In a universe that appears as discrete events, nothing is carried. Everything is recreated. So where do consequences live? They do not live between moments. They live within patterns. A consequence is not something that travels through time. It is something that reappears because the structure that allows it is still present. Fire burns not because yesterday's fire remembered how to burn. It burns because the conditions for burning are satisfied again. A promise matters not because it was made in the past, but because the structure that recognizes promises still exists now. Meaning does not propagate. It reasserts, again and again. This makes responsibility feel different. Responsibility is not about dragging the weight of past actions forward. It is about maintaining patterns that continue to qualify. If a pattern changes, the consequence changes. Not because time healed it, but because the structure no longer supports the same outcome. This explains something deeply human. Why regret fades, not because the past disappears, it already has, but because the present structure no longer recreates the same emotional configuration. Why forgiveness works, not by altering history impossible, but by altering the pattern that keeps reappearing. Change is not something you push into the future. It is something you allow to be instantiated differently. Now, and now. This reframes the idea of agency. You do not act once and send consequences forward. You act by sustaining or altering a pattern across appearances. Each moment, you are given a chance to requalify a slightly different version of yourself. Not a new self, a reassembled one, with slightly adjusted relations. This is why habits feel powerful. They are patterns that qualify easily. They fit the conditions again and again with little resistance. Breaking a habit feels hard not because time resists change, but because the old pattern is very compatible. It reappears effortlessly. Change requires a new pattern that can also qualify. And until it does, it flickers once and disappears, which is why change feels unstable at first, not emotionally, structurally. The new pattern does not yet reappear reliably. Now notice how this aligns with everything else. Learning is not accumulation. It is stabilization. Healing is not erasure. It is reconfiguration. Growth is not extension through time. It is improved compatibility. This perspective removes blame from the past. The past does not exist to be blamed. It removes anxiety about the future. The future does not exist to be feared. There is only the present pattern and its tendency to reappear, which makes the present moment feel quietly powerful. Not because it controls the future, but because it determines what qualifies next. Now slow down. If existence is granted moment by moment, then every moment is neutral. Not morally neutral, ethics still matter. But ontologically neutral, no moment is heavier than another. No moment carries the burden of all that came before. Each moment is complete in itself. This does not trivialize suffering. Pain exists fully when it exists, but it does not compound beyond its event. Trauma feels persistent, not because it lives in time, but because the pattern that generates it keeps reappearing. And patterns can change. Not instantly, not easily, but structurally. This makes the idea of fate feel different. Fate is not a line drawn ahead of you. It is a pattern that keeps qualifying. As long as it qualifies, it appears. When it no longer does, it vanishes. Which means fate is not imposed. It is maintained. Now consider how this alters the sense of choice. Choice is not a fork in the road of time. It is a local adjustment to the pattern, a subtle shift in relationships, a new configuration that may or may not reappear. Freedom is not the power to choose any future. It is the ability to modify compatibility, to make different patterns easier to instantiate. This makes freedom quieter than we imagine, less dramatic, more precise. Now let this settle into something even calmer. If the universe flickers, then there is no long arc carrying justice, meaning, or progress forward automatically. Nothing accumulates by default, which means meaning is fragile, but also renewable. Meaning does not persist on its own. It must be recreated, again and again. This is not a burden. It is an intimacy. Meaning exists only where awareness exists, and awareness exists only when conditions allow. So meaning is always local, always now, which is why moments of meaning feel so complete, even if they do not last. They do not need to last. They were whole when they occurred. Now, reflect on how this touches something very personal. The fear that what you do might not matter because everything is fleeting. But fleetingness does not erase significance. An event does not need to persist to be real. A word spoken once can change a pattern forever. Not because it echoes through time, but because it alters the configuration that keeps reappearing. This is how consequences work in a flickering universe. They are not carried. They are encoded. Now pause again. If existence is event-like and meaning is local, then the universe does not owe us continuity. It does not promise memory. It does not promise progress. It only promises this. When it appears, it is complete, and that completeness is enough. Now look outward one more time. Stars burn, galaxies drift, structures evolve. But all of that happens inside events. The universe does not remember its past. It reasserts its structure. History is not stored anywhere outside the present. History exists only as information encoded now, which means the universe does not age at the deepest level. It changes configurations. But the process of existence itself does not wear down. This makes the cosmos feel less like an old machine and more like a recurring phenomenon, always new, always familiar, which may be why looking at the night sky feels timeless, not because it has lasted forever, but because it is always fresh. Now let your attention come inward again. The feeling of being you right now does not feel tired. It does not feel worn. It feels immediate. Because it is. This awareness has not traveled from the past. It has appeared fully, which is why even after a long day, presence itself feels new. Fatigue belongs to patterns within existence, not to existence itself. This distinction matters. You are tired in existence. Existence is not tired of you. Now, very gently, notice where this leaves us. We are no longer asking whether the universe flickers. We are no longer asking whether awareness persists. We are no longer even asking why existence happens. Those questions have softened. What remains is something quieter, a recognition that existence is not a thing to be defended or explained. It is an occurrence that keeps qualifying, and awareness is one of its expressions, which means being here is not a struggle. It is an alignment, a temporary but complete alignment between pattern and condition. Now, and now, and now, this brings us close to the final stretch. Not toward a conclusion, there will be none, but toward a return to the ordinary feeling of being alive. Now, informed by the quiet possibility that everything you experience is appearing freshly, moment by moment, without ever needing to remember that it once was not. And that recognition changes the texture of stillness itself. At this depth, the universe begins to feel quieter, not empty, not distant, quiet in the way a lake becomes quiet when the wind stops. Everything is still there. Nothing has vanished, but the urge to explain begins to fade, because explanation belongs to continuity. And here, continuity no longer feels essential. What remains is rhythm. Existence appears. Awareness appears with it. Meaning appears inside it. And then, if there is another moment, it happens again. This repetition is so reliable that we mistake it for permanence. But permanence is not required, only recurrence, which brings a strange gentleness to the idea of being alive. Life is not something you must secure across time. It is something that is given, again and again, as long as the pattern fits. This removes the pressure to make existence count in some final sense. There is no ledger carried forward by the universe, no record kept beyond what appears now. This does not mean actions lack weight. It means their weight is local. A kind word does not echo forever, but it fully exists when it exists. A moment of clarity does not persist, but it is complete when it appears. Nothing is diminished by not lasting. Completeness does not require duration. Now consider how this changes the feeling of stillness. When you sit quietly, doing nothing, it can feel like time stretches. But perhaps time is not stretching. Perhaps awareness is loosening its grip on rhythm. You are not tracking every beat. You are allowing some beats to pass unnoticed, and nothing is lost. Existence continues without you noticing it, just as it always has. This is not disengagement. It is trust, You trust that the universe does not need your attention to continue. You trust that awareness will return when alignment resumes, which is why stillness feels safe. Not because nothing happens, but because happening does not require you. Now reflect on how rare this is in a universe built on repetition. Awareness is not required for existence. Existence is not required for awareness to feel whole. They meet, and when they do, experience arises. But neither depends on the other to persist. They only depend on compatibility. This dissolves the sense of urgency we often carry. The sense that we must stay alert, engaged, present, or else something will be lost. Nothing essential is lost in absence. Absence has no memory. It has no regret. It does not accumulate, which makes presence lighter. Presence does not need to defend itself against disappearance. Disappearance leaves no trace. Now think again about the idea of flickering. At first, it sounded alarming. A universe turning on and off. Reality blinking in and out. But here, near the quiet center of the idea, flickering feels gentle. Like blinking. Like breathing. Like sleep. Blinking does not threaten vision. Breathing does not threaten life. Sleep does not threaten awareness. They are interruptions that leave nothing broken. They are resets that maintain coherence. Perhaps the universe flickers not because it is unstable, but because this is the only way stability is possible without accumulation. A way to exist without carrying damage forward. A way to be always new, without forgetting structure. This makes flickering feel less like fragility, and more like elegance. Now consider one last inversion before we move closer to the end. What if continuity were the dangerous thing? A universe that never resets might drift. Errors might accumulate. Noise might compound. Structure might erode. But a universe that restarts cleanly each moment avoids all of that. It never carries errors across non-existence. It never needs repair. It is always exact, which would explain why the laws of physics feel timeless. Not because they persist, but because they are reapplied without variation. Now, let this perspective settle into something personal. You may feel tired sometimes, overwhelmed, worn down, but that wear belongs to patterns inside existence, not to existence itself. The fact that you are aware right now does not feel worn. It feels immediate, fresh, because this awareness has not traveled, it has appeared. Which means there is always a kind of renewal happening, even when life feels heavy. This is not optimism, it is structure. Now notice how this changes the feeling of being behind in life. Behind implies a race, a line, a forward motion. But if existence is event-like, there is no line to fall behind on. There is only the current configuration, and the current configuration is complete. It may be painful, confusing, uncertain, but it is whole. Nothing is missing at the level of being, which means there is no existential debt, no obligation to catch up to some imagined continuity, only the opportunity to let the next moment qualify slightly differently. Now, this realization does not demand action. It does not prescribe behavior. It simply loosens the grip of urgency, and in that looseness, something subtle appears. A sense that being here is not a task. It is a condition being met. You do not need to hold existence together. You do not need to carry yourself forward. You only need to fit, and fitting is not effort. It is alignment, which is why peace often arrives when effort stops. Now consider the universe again, not as a vast thing stretching across time, but as a precise rhythm that has never slipped, a rhythm that does not know it is rhythmic, a rhythm that does not need an audience. And yet, when awareness aligns with it, experience arises. This experience, this moment, is not guaranteed to last. But it does not need to. It is complete now, and completeness does not increase with duration, which makes the idea of return very quiet. Return does not mean going back. It means recognizing something familiar in a new light. Soon, we will come back to the world that feels ordinary. The room you are in, the body you inhabit, the thoughts that drift. Nothing about them will have changed. And yet, something may feel thinner, lighter, as if the weight of continuity has been lifted, as if existence does not need to be carried, as if it simply happens, which prepares us for the final movement. not a conclusion, but a gentle re-entry into the ordinary, now seen as a series of complete moments, appearing, disappearing, appearing again, so quietly that they feel like one continuous life. At this point, the universe no longer feels distant. It feels intimate, not because it has come closer, but because nothing separates you from it anymore. There is no long chain connecting you to reality, no thread stretching from past to future. There is only this moment, appearing, and this awareness, appearing with it. Everything else is memory, or expectation, both of which exist only now. This is where the idea of a flickering universe becomes almost ordinary, not strange, not dramatic, just descriptive. Because when you look closely at your own experience, it has always worked this way. Thoughts appear, disappear, sensations arise, fade, emotions come into focus, then loosen. You do not carry them through time. They happen, and when they stop happening, there is no trace of them except what the present reconstructs. Which means your inner world has always been event-like. The only difference now is that the outer world is allowed to be the same. This changes the feeling of solidity. The chair you are sitting on feels solid, not because it persists endlessly, but because it reappears reliably. The room feels stable, not because it is continuous, but because the pattern qualifies again and again. Nothing you rely on needs to survive absence. It only needs to return correctly. This includes your body. Your body does not feel like something that is rebuilt every moment, but biologically, it already is. Cells replace themselves. Molecules exchange. Signals fire and quiet. The body is not a preserved object. It is a maintained pattern, and patterns do not require continuity. They require structure, which is why the body feels familiar every time awareness arrives. Not because it never left, but because it was reconstructed. This is not speculation. This is happening constantly. You just do not notice, because noticing requires continuity, and continuity is inferred. Now consider how this reframes the idea of safety. We usually associate safety with permanence, with things staying the same, but permanence is not what keeps you safe. Reliability is. The universe does not promise to persist. It promises to qualify, and qualification is more dependable than endurance. Because endurance implies carrying damage forward. Qualification does not. Each moment starts clean, which means the universe is not accumulating risk. It is renewing itself. This is why the night sky feels calm rather than threatening, not because it is empty, but because it is exact. Stars burn with precision. Orbits repeat. Patterns hold. Not because they remember, but because the rules apply again. This exactness extends to the smallest things, the feeling of breathing, the rise and fall of the chest, the pause between breaths. Nothing carries the last breath into the next. Each breath happens because the conditions allow it, and the pause is not a failure. It is simply no breath. Then breathing happens again. Now think about how this softens the fear of interruption. Interruption does not damage the pattern. It resets it. Blinking does not break vision. Sleeping does not break awareness. Pauses do not break existence. They are part of its rhythm, which means the idea of a universe that flickers is not threatening. It is consistent with everything you trust most. Now let your attention rest on something very simple. The fact that you are here, not why, not how, just that you are. That feeling does not feel thin. It does not feel partial. It feels complete. And it feels the same every time awareness appears, which suggests something important. Completeness does not depend on duration. It depends on structure. A moment does not become more real by lasting longer. It is already fully real when it occurs. This is why memories can feel more vivid than long stretches of time. A single moment of clarity can outweigh years of routine. Because reality is not measured in length. It is measured in coherence. Now, notice how gently this dissolves the pressure to use time well. Time is not something you spend. Moments are not currency. You are not running out of being. Being happens, and when it happens, it is whole. This does not mean choices do not matter. Choices matter because they shape patterns. Patterns that may or may not reappear. But choices do not accumulate weight across time. They adjust compatibility, which makes life feel less like a race and more like tuning. Small adjustments, tiny shifts, alignments, which may be why rest is so important. Not because rest prepares you for more time, but because rest loosens patterns that no longer fit. Sleep allows the system to reset, to let unnecessary structures dissolve, to allow new configurations to qualify. This is not psychological advice. It is structural observation. Rest is not laziness. It is recalibration. Now consider how this prepares the ground for return. Soon, everything will feel ordinary again. The sense of a continuous world. The feeling of being a self moving through time. That illusion is useful. It allows coordination, memory, story. But now it rests on a quieter foundation. The knowledge that continuity is not required. That if the universe is flickering, it is flickering perfectly. So perfectly that you have never needed to notice, and you still do not. You can live as if time flows, as if things persist, as if you move forward. Nothing breaks if you do. Because the illusion works, it always has. The difference is not in behavior, it is in weight. Things feel lighter when they are not carried across infinity, which brings us very close to the return. Not a return to ignorance, a return to simplicity, to the feeling of being here, without needing to explain why that keeps happening. And from here, only two movements remain. One to gently step back into the world as it feels, and one to let everything fade, without ever really ending. The world does not look different now. The room is the same. The sounds are the same. Your body feels familiar. Nothing has shifted outwardly. And that is exactly how a return should feel. Because if existence truly flickers, it would never announce itself by changing appearances. It would hide inside reliability. The chair still supports you. Gravity still holds. Thoughts still arise. Everything behaves as it always has. The difference is not in what happens. It is in how lightly it happens. The world no longer feels like something you must keep up with. Moments do not feel like stepping stones you might miss. They feel like arrivals, again and again. You notice this first in small things. A breath that does not rush. A sound that does not demand interpretation. A thought that appears without needing to lead anywhere. The present moment no longer feels like a narrow bridge between past and future. It feels like a landing, and then another, and another. This is not because time has slowed. Time does not slow. What has softened is the need to imagine time as a line. The world functions perfectly well without that image. You can still plan, still remember, still move. But beneath those activities, something else is visible now. The fact that none of them require continuity to feel whole. You do not need to feel carried from one moment to the next. You only need each moment to arrive, and it does. This changes the feeling of responsibility, not responsibility in life that remains, but responsibility for existence itself. You are not responsible for keeping reality going. You are not holding the universe together by attention or effort. Existence does not need your vigilance. It qualifies on its own. Your role is simpler. You appear when it appears. You experience when it experiences, and then if there is another moment, it happens again. This makes the world feel strangely generous, not because it gives you anything, but because it does not require anything from you to continue. It does not ask you to justify your presence. It does not demand explanation. It simply allows. Now, look again at the ordinary. The weight of your body, the texture of air, the quiet hum of awareness itself. None of this feels provisional. None of it feels partial. Everything feels complete, which suggests something very important. The ordinary world has always been enough. We only burden it with ideas of permanence, urgency, and fear. When those ideas loosen, what remains is not emptiness. It is presence, and presence does not need a future. It does not need to last. It does not need to go anywhere. It is already here, which means nothing needs to be concluded. Nothing needs to be solved. Nothing needs to be secured. The world continues exactly as it should. And if it flickers so perfectly that it feels like continuity. This is not a revelation to act upon. It is a perspective to rest in. You can forget it tomorrow. You can live exactly as you did before. the universe will not object, because the universe does not remember. It qualifies. Again and again. The return, then, is not dramatic. It is gentle. You step back into life without carrying a theory, only a quieter relationship with moments. They no longer feel like they are rushing past you. They feel like they are meeting you, which prepares the final movement. Not a conclusion, not a statement, but a fading, a slow letting go of even these thoughts. Because thoughts, too, are events. They appear, and they disappear. And nothing needs to follow them when they are gone, just as nothing preceded them when they arrived. And that is where everything can finally rest. Nothing new needs to be said now, not because there is nothing left, but because everything that needed to appear already has. The world continues quietly. Breath follows breath. Sound follows silence. Awareness follows awareness. And between them, there is no urgency. If the universe flickers, it does so without drama. There is no flash, no signal, no moment where something announces itself as real. Reality does not declare its arrival. It simply is. And then if there is another moment, it is again. This makes existence feel less like a journey and more like a series of gentle landings, each one complete, each one sufficient. Nothing needs to be carried forward. Nothing needs to be held together. The universe does not remember where it has been, and it does not worry about where it is going. It qualifies. And so it appears, again and again. You can feel this now. If you do not look for it, the quiet sense of being here does not feel stretched. It does not feel thin. It feels whole. Not because it will last, but because it does not need to. Duration does not add weight to presence. Presence already contains everything it needs. Thoughts slow down on their own, not because you push them away, but because they are events like everything else. They arrive, they dissolve, and when they dissolve, there is no gap to notice. Only the next moment, if it comes, if awareness flickers too, it does so gently. There is no edge where it falls off, no border where it ends. There is simply less to hold on to, and that is not a loss. It is a release. Sleep begins this way every night, not as a collapse, but as a loosening. Awareness does not fight to stay. It simply stops needing to appear. And when it returns, if it returns, it does not feel like return. It feels like continuity, just as existence does. Perhaps this is the deepest comfort hidden inside the idea of a flickering universe. That nothing has to survive absence. That nothing needs to pass through darkness. That what appears, appears whole. And what does not appear, leaves no wound. The universe does not strain to exist, and neither do you. If there is another moment, it will arrive without effort. And if there is not, there will be no experience of not arriving. Which means there is nothing here that needs to be feared. Only something that keeps happening, quietly, perfectly, now, and now, and now. You do not need to follow this thought any further. It can fade on its own, like the edge of a dream, when you no longer try to remember it, and it gently lets go. Close your eyes if you wish. There is nothing you need to hold. The universe is still turning, or perhaps it is simply appearing, again, for as long as it quietly can.